Hey everyone, and welcome back to our final video on our SwiftUI beginner series, where we're working through these develop in Swift tutorials. Today we're going to be diving into the 5th chapter, lists in TextFields. If you haven't gone through the other chapters, I did chapter 1 and chapter 2 in the first video, chapter 3 layout and style in the second, and buttons and state in the third. And this is the last of this series, which is lists and text fields. After that, it goes into data modeling. If you'd like me to go through those tutorials, let me know in the comments below. If you missed any of the previous videos, they should also be linked as well. If you want to access this website, you can do so by typing in the URL or clicking on the description below. So much easier. So just to give you a preview of what we're going to be doing today is we're going to create a dynamic interface that stores a set of items in an array and displays them using lists. We can use text fields and bindings to let people enter text. I'll just give you a quick preview of how the app functions. So we have our pick a pal here, where we have some people already added. We can also type in some custom names. So if we wanted Arnold, we can hit return and add that to the list. And we can also use this button to pick a random name. So we can see Po Chun got picked, Andre got picked. We can even enable this to when that name is picked, we can remove them from the list. Alrighty, let's dive on in and learn how we can create this. So if you want to follow along, you can click on this link here, create dynamic content, and it will take you to the tutorial. I'm also going to go ahead and create a new Xcode project. Make sure we're on iOS app for our template. Let's call it pick a. Make sure we're on SwiftUI language Swift. Don't need testing or storage for this app. We'll go ahead and create it. Alright, so we already created our project, and we're going to replace the contents of our content view here. We're going to replace it with a static list here. So we're going to go ahead and create a list with text Andre and these other names. So a list view adds other views to the content in its body, like separators between rows and visual elements, such as rounded corners and backgrounds. So let's go ahead and get rid of this image and text here, and we'll create a list with a capital L, add a brace, and we'll add some text. So we'll do Alicia, Andre, Jasmine, and Po Chun. Cool. One thing to note with lists as well, they're actually scrollable by default, so you can kind of grab it and move it around. The only thing is, to be able to add or remove names while using the app, we need to actually remove those text views from the list, the ones we just created. And then we're going to actually add a state property called names to store that array of string values. We're going to add a few names to the array. An array contain any values of any type, but all the items in the array need to be the same type. So in the case of if we have names, which are usually strings, we can't then add a number, unfortunately. So let's go ahead and under our string here, create a @state private variable called names string, and then we'll add our names here. So we'll add our square brackets. We'll start off with the first name. Then after each one, we're going to use a comma to separate them. And I'm just going to go ahead and use my autofill feature there. Thank you, Apple Intelligence, for being so handy. If you need to pause and catch up, go for it. Otherwise, if you want to learn more about arrays, you can check out the video. Should be linked up here with a comment card where I explain arrays and dictionaries and kind of data types there. All right, now in our list, we're going to replace all this text here, and we're going to use a for each. And within these brackets, we're going to use the names, comma, ID, then we're going to use a colon, / dot, description. Outside of this bracket, we're going to add a new brace. We're going to say name in text. We're going to display the name. So the for each view uses a closure with a parameter to represent each value from the dataset you give it. You might read the syntax name in as a name value coming into the closure. So for an experiment, it wants us to click and drag and see how the scrolling behavior, yeah, I think I already showed that before. Haha, I'm ahead of you tutorial. All right, now in section 2, we're going to use text fields to enter names. So a text field view lets people enter text into a box. The text field modifies a string value in our app's state. When people tap return, we can use a closure to add the name they entered to the list. Under our state for our kind of array of different people, we can add a state private var, and we'll say name to add. We'll have this equal an empty string. Next, we're going to create a text field beneath the line and pass it a binding to the name to add property. When someone types into the text field, it changes the value of name to add, and SwiftUI knows to update your view. A binding is a way for you to give view access to state that another view owns. To create a binding to a state property, we actually use the prefix of the kind of $ or Shift-4 on your keyboard. So we can create a text field. Let's go ahead and create it outside of this list. So if you want to double check, click on the list, make sure you're outside of it by either typing out text field. You can also use the object library here. Search for text field. So I'm going to select a text field. And see we have a placeholder and then we have a value. I'm going to change the placeholder to be add name. And for the value, we're going to add our $ prefix here, name to add. We're going to use the .onSubmit, which is going to be a modifier to add the entered name to the arrays and reset the text field. Similar to a button, .onSubmit uses a closure to run imperative code when someone taps return. Cool. So we'll do .onSubmit, and we'll include our code, names.append, which is basically going to add that new element to an array, and we're going to include that name to add. We don't need to use the binding $ prefix here. And then we're going to say name to add equals an empty string. Essentially, this is going to take that value and reset it. So the first thing it's going to do is add it to the array, and then with this line, we're basically resetting it to be an empty string. So let's go ahead and type this in this add to name down here. And we'll say Jerry, and then when we hit return on our keyboard, we can see that Jerry gets added, and this gets reset to an empty string. Therefore, the placeholder text is there. Cool. We can also add an if statement to prevent empty strings from being added to the list. So currently, if we just press enter with nothing in there, we kind of get this blank space. We don't really want this. So what we can do is we can use an if statement to check if it's empty. So the if statement checks a condition. The exclamation point name to add dot is empty. If name to add contains an empty string, is empty will be true. We want to execute code when the string is not empty. So we're going to use the exclamation point, aka the not operator, to negate the meeting. We can also read the code as if name to add is not empty. So let's go ahead and add that to our code here. So after our on submit, we're going to say if exclamation point name to add dot is empty. Remember, if name to adds is not empty is essentially what we're doing. We're going to add a brace here. We're going to also add another closing brace. So now if we try to add something that's empty, I'm hitting return on my keyboard, nothing's adding. If we do have text, it will add it. Cool. So to see how our app works with the iOS keyboard, we can actually run our app in the simulator. To change what you're kind of simulating on, at the top here, currently it's on Noah's iPhone, you can actually select from any of these other simulators that you want to use. So let's go ahead and use the iPhone 16, and we can press on the Start Active Scheme. Command R also will build the app. And we can see that our build did succeed, and now we have this iPhone that pops up in front of us. This is what you should typically do a lot of your end testing on, because you can simulate an iPhone. You can also actually, as you saw, my phone was connected. You can use an iPhone or iPad if you have one as well. Alrighty, so what we need to do is we need to choose the keyboard in order for the simulator to see the keyboard when we activate the text field. All right, so if we were to normally just click down here, we can actually use our Mac keyboard to add a name. So if I were to type in Bobby, right? If you want to see what it looks like using the actual iOS keyboard, you can go to the top of your screen here where it says IO. You can go to Keyboard, and you can toggle the software keyboard, and you can actually press on this. So like Tyler, right? The hotkey to actually enable or disable it is also Command K. So Command K to turn it on or turn it off. Alrighty, so when you're done running your app, I would not press this X button up here. Instead, on Xcode, I'd press this square here. If you close it out the other way, you might cause a crash. You'll probably get an error in your code. Always best to stop things appropriately. Next step, autocorrection doesn't always recognize names, so it makes sense to disable it for the Pick-a-Pal app. Oh my goodness, can't tell you how many times that happens to me. So what we need to do is we need to disable autocorrect. So on our text field, before our dot on submit, let's add a dot auto correction disabled. So to see these changes in the simulator, we'll need to run it again. So you can press that play button if you would like. This is one of the many modifiers that alter the behavior and appearance of the keyboard. You can do things that, let's say you're entering just a phone number. You can change the style to just be numbers, like that kind of numpad. There's even the email ones, that @ symbol's always ready. There are so many different ways to alter the appearance and usability of that keyboard. So Xcode does pause the preview when we run an app in the simulator. We can press this refresh button here to reactivate it and get our preview going. So we can keep that simulator open while we continue to work in Xcode. And you'll also notice that this debug area has also appeared. If we want to hide it, we can go to View, Debug Area, Hide Debug Area. And that'll give us some real estate again. Alrighty. Let's talk about section 3, which is picking a random element from an array. So we're going to add a button below the text field that picks a random name from the list. We'll display the picked name in a text view at the top of the app using a ternary conditional operator. I also have a video on ternary operators if you want to check that out. Cool. So under our name to add, let's add a state private variable picked name. We'll also set this to be an empty string. Now we're going to add a text view above the list to display the picked name. If there's no picked name, then it would be a single space. So let's go above our list. Let's make a little bit of space here. Let's say text picked name. And then we'll do dot is empty, question mark. I'm going to create an empty string. We're going to actually put a space this time. Then picked name. So essentially the way that the ternary operator works is a compact way to represent a view changed based on an either/or condition. Because the logic is right there in the view or modifier's code, it's more concise than techniques compared to like using if-else statements and things like this, which are more readable but kind of hide the logic. You can choose whatever suits you. Essentially, we're saying, if this is empty, do this. Otherwise, you show the pick name. So if there's nothing here, it's just going to be like a space bar. Otherwise, show that picked name. So now we're going to add a button below the text field that picks a random name from the list. And just to kind of show how this works, if this were to be a J here, right, it would just show. So we can use the random element with an array to get one of its elements at random. If the array is empty, we'll get a special Swift value nil, which indicates a non-value. So let's go below our text field and all of this here. So we're going to go 2 below this. Go button, pick random name, brace here. If let random name equals names dot random element, then add another brace here. Picked name equals random name. Cool. Then we'll create an else condition. Open that on up. Picked name equals empty strings, no spacebar here. So the note here, the possibility of a non-value indicates a risk to our code. If let is a kind of if statement that lets you work safely with potentially nil values. In this case, if condition is met, the array returned a random name. You can use a random name in the first block of code. If the condition is not met, the array returned nil. The code in the else block runs. So let's go ahead and pick a random name, and we can see that they are displaying up top. Sometimes you get the same name over and over again. It will, like Pochun was there twice, it'll just repeat it. Alrighty, let's add a divider to visually separate the text field and the button. A list automatically uses dividers to separate items. We can look at our list and we can notice that the alignment between the dividers and the text. So before our button here, and add a divider. All right, section 4, use a toggle to customize behavior. Give people the option to remove names after they're picked. To implement this feature, add a toggle for people to choose between the two behaviors. Toggle represents an on-off state. Much like the text field, our toggle will modify the state of our view, so we'll need to add a state property for it. Let's go up top again, at state, private variable, should remove picked name equals false. So we added the Boolean value, so with toggles on off, true or false. We'll then add the button, add a toggle with a binding to the new Boolean property. Toggles are similar to text fields, both require a single binding. Because a toggle controls an on-off state, its binding is a Boolean value. So let's go down to our divider here, create some space, then we'll say toggle, remove when picked. Still within the arguments, we're going to do comma after the string, is on with a capital O. We're going to reference that binding, so we're going to use our dollar sign, should remove picked name. All right, step 3, modify our button's functionality to remove the picked name from the list if the toggle is on. We can use remove all to run code in a closure for each of the elements in an array. The closure represents the element with the name parameter and returns a bool value to indicate whether the element should be removed. Alrighty, so let's give this a go. In our button here, I'm just going to move the preview over so it's a little bit easier to understand this part. I'm just going to make some more space here before our else statement. So we have our button, if let random name, and we choose a random, and we declare it. We can do if should remove pick names. So if this condition is true, then names dot remove all. We're going to add another brace, name in. Then we're going to go ahead and return name equals random name. All right, so the expression name equals pick name determines which name should be removed. Arrays don't prevent duplicate items, so identical names will all be removed from the list. We can avoid this by including the first letter of their last name. For example, Andre C and Andre W. We can learn more about creating, updating, and deleting data in the data modeling volume, which is going to kind of be the after the beginner tutorials also found on the Develop in Swift tutorials on developer.apple here. So let's just look at this code real quick. So if let random name, so we're kind of picking that random name. Once we have it, we're then saying, okay, if this toggle is on, so it's true, then it's going to remove all the names that are equal to that random name that's been selected. Else, it's just going to add that to our array, and it's just going to be all good there. It's just going to add the thing. So let's also test how it kind of worked when there were those multiple names. I'm also going to put the code up here as well if you need to copy it. So we have, let's add Jackson and add it. Now what we can do is select this. We can pick a random name, and you'll see that Andre was removed from the list. So if we have multiple Jacksons here and multiple Jasmines, let's see what happens when one of those names get picked. So Jasmine got picked and both of them got removed. Alicia got removed and there's only one there. And if we remove both Jacksons at the same time, our list is gone. Let's add another one. So that's populated again. All right, let's now use a custom button label. So we're going to customize the size of the button's label by using a new initializer that takes two closures, one for the action and one for the label. So down here, we're going to have our button style. So let's go to the end of our button here. We'll do dot button style. And we'll do dot bordered prominent. And we'll do the font. It'll be dot title 2. We're also going to change the button to use a custom label. So here where we have the kind of arguments with the string value, we're going to go ahead and delete that. So we can use this technique to make a button out of any view. So as a note, the initializer for the button has two closures, one for the action and one for the label. The action closure contains imperative code and the label closure contains decorative view code. So what we're going to do is outside of this other button right here, so we can even double click on this one, which kind of shows our code. We're going to then add a label. And then we're going to add the code down here. And we can say text, pick, random name. We add some padding. So it wants us dot vertical, comma 8. And some padding horizontally as well. Dot horizontal, comma 16. So you can see that within our first one here, we kind of have the imperative code. So what happens when the button's pressed? Then we added a label and another brace here. And then we got to choose the kind of style of the label. If there's text, there's images. You can even wrap this in an H stack with an image, right? All right, next step is improve our app design. Now that our app is functional, we can add our own colors and icons to make it unique. So we can add a title and icon to the top of the view. So let's go ahead and scroll up here with our VStack. And within that first VStack, we're going to create another VStack. And this time it's going to have some spacing. Set that to be 8. Open that up, add an image. We can go over here. I think it's using, let's check which one it's using. Person.3 sequence fill. Let's go ahead and drag and drop that in. You can also type this out if you'd like. Some text here. Pick a pal. Add some properties to it. Say dot font, dot title. And you'll notice that we're putting the properties outside of the VStack. This way, everything within the VStack is getting updated. And because we're using SF images, that's also affected by the font size. And let's also make it bold. All right, let's also add the app's accent color to the icon. So we'll do dot foreground style, dot tint for the image. And we can also add also wants us to use hierarchical rendering mode for the icon. So we can use dot symbol rendering mode dot hierarchical. And so now we can see that we kind of have that cascading effect, which is going to alter the opacity of the symbols components, which is pretty cool. Let's also update the style of the picked name. So here we have the text with our ternary operator, do dot font, dot title 2, hold it, and we can also give it a foreground style as well. So dot foreground style, dot tint. I'm just gonna hop in our assets folder real quick. I can change that tint from blue to maybe something else. Maybe we can do like a pink or something. All right, let's hop back into our content view. All right, next step is to apply a rounded rectangle clip shape to the list. So let's go to the end of our list. If you want to double click on the kind of braces there, what we can do is dot clip shape. Then we can select rounded rectangle and give it a corner radius. This one wants it a corner radius of 8. So developers often make lists that occupy full screen of an app, in which case rounded corners aren't necessary. We embed this list in a VStack with other views, so the rounded corners is a nice design touch. It's your app, you can do whatever you want with it. We can also see how this kind of updates. Just kind of see right up here where my mouse is, how this changes. Oh, look at that, sometimes I get ahead of the tutorial, I already changed my accent color, but if you want to change it, you of course can. If you want to match the exact values in that screenshot, those are there. So step 7, we want to use an empty array for the default value of names, so our app is ready to be used by other people. So let's go ahead in our array here, just highlight and delete that. So when someone first downloads and opens Pick-a-Pal, it will be completely blank. Cool, let's go ahead and check our understanding. So it wants us to select the correct code for passing view state into a control. Up here we have a @binding check spelling equals true. So it should be this middle one here. We're going to use the @state to represent the state of a view, then create a binding of it using the $sign. So here we've created the state private variable. Then when we're toggling it, that's when we use our $sign binding. Select the ternary conditional operator that never results in a number greater than 0. All right, so if our value is greater than 0, then we have otherwise 100. Otherwise, this doesn't make sense. We don't even have our question mark from our ternary. This next one here, value is greater than 100. Value results in 100. If value is greater than 100, return value. All right, it's going to be this bottom one here. If the value is greater than 100, the result is 100, the value after the question mark operator there. Otherwise, the result is the original value. Let's go to the last question. Select the code that performs an action when people tap return in a text field. So text field name, on submit action here. We have the text field name, on enter. So I think we found out this was the on submit, which you can use the return key on your keyboard on your Mac or on your iPhone as well. Use the .on submit modifier to react to any text entry in a text field. Great job. So if you want to read the article and kind of learn a little bit more, there is that available for you here. You can also look at the topics and skills covered. List views for unknown amounts of data, storing variables of a set, data in an array, using for each to create corresponding views for each element in an array that kind of occupied our list there, text fields for entering that text, bindings to share that state across views, and custom labels for buttons. So if you want to continue practicing, there are these options here. If you want to challenge yourself and learn more, but the next steps would be to go to the kind of intermediate or maybe advanced, I don't know what I'm going to call that series yet, which starts with data modeling. But these tutorials are great if you're just getting started. Also, real quick, because we haven't, let's see our final app on the simulator. All right, here's our Pick-a-Pal as if someone had downloaded it. I'm going to add my name. Okay, let's hit return. I got Greg, Bobby. And the nice thing is auto corrections off. So if you have a name that sounds like something else, it's going to be okay. And let's add a second Noah. All right. And now what we can do is pick random names, doesn't remove them. Let's toggle it on. It picked Ardio, they're gone. Pick Noah, I'm gone twice. And we can see that it does reset, works as intended. Cool stuff there. So that's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. If you learned anything new, or if you have any plans on using any of these things in your own app, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, that's it for the beginner tutorial series. If you want to learn more about syntax, you can check out my Swift Fundamentals series, my Swift in 60, which go over them really quickly, or I have a SwiftUI playlist where you can learn about adding different app templates or using different features in your own applications. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you found this helpful. And if you have any suggestions or if you want to learn any specifics about apps, also let me know. Otherwise, have a fantastic day, and we'll see you in the next one. Remember, dream big, code bigger.